asked me to explain personal evolution, that how does a human being evolve from conception to death, and maybe even afterwards. Now, we would continue to define human being as a constitution of three distinct but interactive dimensions. The most important dimension of a human being, of course, is the physical body. There cannot be a human being without a physical body. The second is our intellect, our intelligence, and third is our spirituality. So the question is how these three human dimensions go through a process of evolution. Now, the most easy to understand, of course, is the evolution of our physical body. Everybody knows that our physical bodies evolve. From the moment of conception to birth, we evolve inside the mother's womb, and once we are born, then we begin to grow as a child, and when we become adults, then we get into middle age, then we are old, and then we die. So this physical body goes through a process of material evolution, if you will. And the material evolution of the human body is almost like a bell curve, that you go on the top of the bell, and that's when you're most youthful, when you have the most energy, and when your limbs are the strongest, and then you begin to decline, and then you become zero at your death, and you're buried or you're burned, and a new process begins for the decomposition of your body if you're buried, and with passage of time, most of your body dissolves into the earth. And if you're burned, of course, your body turns into ashes. So there is no confusion, there is no misunderstanding that the physical body goes through a process of material evolution. Now, of course, if you die young or if you die very, very old, the process of material changes in your body is somewhat different than if you live the statistically average age. Now, we also know that if the human body is not infected with disease, and if the community as a general is living in good social and environmental conditions, the evolution of the human body is somewhat more pleasant and benign as compared to human beings who live in poverty, in environmentally unsound conditions. They die sooner, their bodies contract diseases, they are in pain, they live sort of unhealthy lives and shorter lives. So that is also true, that the material evolution of the physical body not only depends on your genetic structure, what you have been given by nature, but also it depends on the environmental factors in which your body is allowed to grow and to go through the process of material evolution. Now, that part is simple and we need not dwell on it, except that the one point must be understood, that the evolution of your body does not stop at your death, because when you're buried, your body does go through a different process of evolution. You can call it degeneration, you can call it decomposition, whatever word you want to use, but the truth is that your body does not stop from going through the material evolution when you are dead. Your body continues to grow, continues to go through the process of evolution, sometimes for centuries, depending on what the conditions are in which your body is laid at rest. I mean, mummification of a human body is also before us, and that is literally, you have stopped with chemicals and preservatives the further degeneration of the human body. So that is also possible. Now, the other aspect that goes through evolution, and which is the most intriguing part of human existence, is the evolution of the human mind. Now, we are not sure whether when we are born with a set of knowledge. We are born with instincts, and we are born with emotions which arise from our instincts. And but when we are introduced into a community, we begin to develop knowledge, we begin to develop social knowledge, and depending on the sophistication of the community, our minds develop accordingly. So a person living in a highly simple community, his or her mind is going to be very different in terms of evolution than a person who's born in a highly technological society, and there the mind will evolve somewhat differently. For example, you living in a small community without any electrical or mechanical gadgets, your knowledge of operating those gadgets will be very limited or perhaps non-existent. But a child, even living in a technologically sophisticated society, would begin to operate machines and computers with pretty good, skills, because the mind has been exposed to those gadgets. So it is clear that the mind evolves in a community, and it directly depends upon the sophistication of the community how a mind would develop. Now, please also understand that the evolution of mind is knowledge-based, because when we talk about mind, we are essentially talking about knowledge. And of course, human knowledge is limited, and the knowledge of human species is limited. But within the species, each individual has different forms of knowledge, has different depth of knowledge. For example, a physician will have relatively more deep knowledge of how human body functions as compared to a truck driver, who probably would know how to drive on different roads under different weather conditions. So it depends, each individual gathers knowledge in a very special way. And in our modern communities, we have divided knowledge into different disciplines. And since no one human being can achieve the entire knowledge, therefore we ask individuals to specialize in one particular field. For example, in law or in medicine or in accounting. These are, knowledge-based disciplines, but also skill-based disciplines. You may be, very good in operating one kind of machine. Another person would be very good in developing the skills to operate another kind of machine. So the development of knowledge, pure intellect, and development of skills, or a combination of both, each individual develops separately. Now, of course, just like our human body goes through a process of change, and I said bell curve is a perfect graphic image to explain the material evolution of a body, I don't think our minds go through a bell curve. Even though there might be some sort of growth and decay, but it is not a bell curve, so to speak. I think we can continue to gain knowledge and develop our knowledge base over a long period of time, in fact until we die. So mind can go up and then it can stabilize, even though it might not grow further up. But I think neuroplasticity shows us that mind doesn't have to follow the bell curve. And even though dementia and Alzheimer's disease and forgetfulness are common in old age, but you can do things in order to stabilize your mind and preventing the bell curve degeneration of your mind. And I think the secret of maintaining a good mind, or maintaining the evolution of a good mind, is constant acquisition of knowledge. Now let me distinguish between two functions of our mind. One is that it acquires knowledge. For example, I acquired the knowledge of law in order to teach, and even within the area of law, I specialize in one particular or two areas of law, and I gain knowledge in that. I acquire knowledge. So knowledge is acquired, and the word acquisition is very important. Once we have acquired knowledge, then we begin to use it. For example, when I'm teaching a law class, I am using my knowledge, and the students are acquiring the knowledge in that class. So minds can do two distinct things. They can acquire knowledge and they can use knowledge that they already have. Similarly, the skills. With the help of our mind and our physical body, we can acquire a skill and then we can use a skill. So please distinguish that a skill, for example, a computer game. In order to learn to play a computer game most productively and most effectively, you need the coordination of your hands, because your hands are on the joystick or on the computer keyboard when you're playing the game, and your mind is also guiding you in playing the computer game. So the computer game is actually a combination of your physical body skills and your mental knowledge. Perhaps all human activity to some extent involves our physical body, because even when I'm teaching in a law class, even though I'm using my knowledge, I'm also using my tongue in order to speak. So the complex physical infrastructure that helps me speak is very important for me to use my knowledge. Even the language sign, we use our hands in order to communicate. So it seems like the physical body is a participant in many cases when we are using knowledge. And so the acquisition of knowledge is in fact is the mental evolution, or is the evolution of our mind. And I think this is very important to understand, that it is the acquisition of knowledge, it is the acquisition of skills directly related to the evolution of mind. Using skills and using the knowledge that we have acquired, that is not fully related to the evolution of mind. It's like, you grow from 5'2" to 5'6", that is growth. But at 5'6", whatever you do with your physical body, your body is, not growing in height, even though you're using your, physical body to make a basket in basketball or whatever. So the point is that it is the acquisition of knowledge which is directly related to the evolution of mind. And those individuals who acquire very little knowledge, and I'm not making a distinction between knowledge and skills over here. I think I am going to use the word knowledge to include both abstract knowledge as well as knowledge, the combination of knowledge and skills. So acquisition of knowledge in the broad sense is the evolution of the mind. And individuals that stop acquiring knowledge, they peak out and they might begin to degenerate in their mental evolution. So if you stop acquiring new knowledge, your mind may follow the same bell curve that your body follows. Body has no choice but to follow the bell curve if you live a long natural life. Of course, if you die young, your body will not go through the entire bell curve evolution. But if you live to the full ripe age and you die of natural causes, it seems like even though you have a healthy life, you might still go through some kind of bell curve. Now, the same is true about mind, and actually your physical body might be at a different point on the bell curve than your mind. For example, if you stop acquiring knowledge at the age of 20, your body is still going up on the left side of the bell curve, but your mind has already peaked out. So please note that the evolution of the mind may peak out before the evolution of the physical body. And similarly, the evolution of the mind may peak out after the body peaks out on the bell curve. So there is no natural synchronicity between mind and body. You cannot synchronize, in other words, the evolution of the mind with the evolution of the body. If it happens, that's okay. But in many cases, the two bell curves will follow different time sequence. So there is every possibility that your mind bell curve is not fully compatible with your physical bell curve. And I think that is an important point. Now the third is spirituality, and I think that is also a very important aspect of human life. And I have defined spirituality as goodness. I don't want to go into some abstract definition of spirituality. To me, spirituality is goodness. If you're arrogant, if you're deceitful, if you're dishonest, if you're unreliable, if you are impatient, if you think very highly of yourself, you're not spiritual. You cannot be spiritual if you're dishonest. You cannot be spiritual if you're arrogant. You cannot be spiritual if you're deceitful. And you cannot be spiritual if you are unreliable. It is that simple. So people who are honest, people who show humility, people who are reliable, people who are, honest, I think patient, these are the people who, in my books, are spiritual. Spirituality is a set of things that fall under the category of goodness. Now the question is, do you undergo an evolution of goodness? And the answer is yes. Because when you're born, we don't know whether you are born with a strong sense of goodness. It seems like some religions argue that you are born in sin and therefore you have to overcome, and maybe you can never overcome the sinness which is part of your genetic being. I disagree with that. I think that is the most dubious understanding of goodness. The related theory to born in sin is, of course, that you're born selfish, or that you're born evil, or that you're born not good. I also don't subscribe to that. Whether you're born with goodness, inherent goodness, I'm not sure about that either. I think the studies that I have consulted are inconclusive for me. So I begin with the assumption that you're born neither good nor bad. Actually, you're born with sort of blank slate as far as goodness is concerned. But right away, maybe even in your mother's womb after you're conceived, you begin to develop a sense of goodness and badness. I think you begin to hear things that are said around you while you're in the womb. And even though I don't have any scientific evidence to show that, I believe that you begin to develop a sense of goodness and a sense of badness while you are in the womb. Then, of course, when you're born and you are a child and you are raised in a family, then the family culture and the concept of goodness in the family is going to affect you. Perhaps indelibly, which means you cannot erase it. But you can also erase it, because I like this wonderful verse of the Quran that we create night out of the day and the day out of the night. And the day arises out of the night and the night arises out of the day. Which means that sometimes human beings do not follow the culture and the traits of their families. And good children are born in bad families, and bad children are born and raised in good families. So there is no essential connection between the family and the child, but there's a functional connection between the family and the child. The family does affect the child, but not completely. And I think that is good, because if children were totally affected by the families, then there will be no evolution of the human species. It is good that children do not completely follow the culture of their families. But the point is that as you are growing up within your family and in a community, you begin to understand the distinction between good and bad, the understanding between truth and lies, falsehood, the understanding between honesty and dishonesty, the understanding between arrogance, humility, and the understanding between being straightforward and deceitful, the understanding between reliable and unreliable. And even if your family is spiritually deficient, which means that the family members in your household are for the most part dishonest, or they are unreliable, or they are arrogant, most likely you are going to develop those traits. But you may not. I think that is the good part, that you may actually rebel against the morality of your family, and you may become totally different from your family. And that is the evolution of the human individual. The moral evolution, or the spiritual evolution of the human individual, is the acquisition of goodness, or losing goodness, both. I think our spiritual evolution could be both positive and negative. It could be moral and immoral. It could be towards goodness, and it could be towards badness. In addition to family, of course, the schools and the communities, they also construct your sense of goodness and your sense of badness. For example, in a racist society, children born in a racially dominant household will learn racism. And racism is not spiritually good. It is spiritually bad. If you are a racist person, if you think your race is superior to other races, then of course this is a manifestation of arrogance. So arrogance, which is anti-spiritual, could be manifested in many ways. For example, if you think that you're intellectually superior to everybody around you, you're arrogant. If you think you are most beautiful among all the people around you, or even far away from you, you are arrogant. If you think that your race is superior to other races, you're arrogant. So arrogance can be a sense of superiority that you acquire either as an individual or as a member of a group. And arrogance is essentially something that corrupts your spirituality. So similarly, deceitfulness, similarly impatience, and unreliability. If you become unreliable, you make a promise but you never fulfill it. You set people up by giving them assurances, but you don't come through. This is your spiritual makeup. So I would distinguish this from your mental makeup. To me, mind, even though, this separation between mind and spirituality, and between spirituality and physical body, these are not, mutually exclusive parts of a human personality. And that's why we are one human being, and our personality has all these three aspects: spirituality, intellect, and physical body. But nevertheless, when we are trying to distinguish one from the other, we are not saying that they are not related to each other. I think that's an important point. So mind is related to spirituality. But the focus of spirituality is goodness, whereas the focus of mind is knowledge, either the acquisition of knowledge or the use of knowledge, both. even though the concept of goodness and the concept of badness cannot be separated from mind, and spirituality has a Gnostic dimension to it, knowledge dimension to it. But nevertheless, everything that knowledge acquires is not related to spirituality. So everything that we learn in law, for example, is not related to arrogance or deceitfulness. For example, how to make a will there's a mechanical infrastructure that you need to know in order to make an effective will. But of course, there could be deception and there could be unreliability of witnesses and all that. So things become very complex when you interpose intellect and spirituality, and things become more confusing rather than more illuminating. And therefore, it makes sense that you understand spirituality and knowledge separately. And then you can see the relationships between the two. So, spirituality is goodness, and we go through an evolution of spirituality. Either we become more and more good, or we become, maybe in some cases, more and more bad. In some cases, our goodness peaks out and we don't acquire any more goodness. And in some cases, our badness peaks out and we don't acquire any more badness. So, so the bell curve, I'm not sure to what extent the bell curve applies to spirituality. Probably it does not. I think people who are patient until they die. And people who are reliable, they are reliable until they die. They are reliable all their lives. So I don't think that spirituality goes through a bell curve, that you're most spiritual at one point and then you begin to degenerate. It could happen in some cases, but as a general observation, I think spirituality does not experience the bell curve that definitely the physical body does. So then what is human evolution? Now human evolution at the species level is the evolution of the human body, that over the centuries how our body has evolved. Maybe our minds have become larger than before. Maybe our bodies have become less sturdier than before. That would be the evolution of the human body over a period of time for the entire species. Similarly, the intellectual evolution of the human species will be measured over time. That are we more intellectual in the sense that do we have more knowledge now than we did 2,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago? And the spiritual evolution would be that are we more good as a human species than we were 5,000 years ago? I have no reason to believe that human species is evolving spiritually one way or the other. I have no insights into that. Some people argue that human species today conducts with more goodness than the human species did 5,000 years ago, or maybe 100 years ago, or maybe in the Second World War. There was massive genocide in Europe, and millions of people were killed. Would genocide never happen again? We see that genocide happened in Africa, in Rwanda. So I'm not sure that to what extent human species is going through a positive spiritual evolution. And that's why periodically prophets instruct us in the knowledge and in the behavior of spirituality. Let me explain this, that spirituality actually is behavior. Spirituality is not pure intellect. If you just believe in goodness as an intellectual construct, but your behavior, your actual conduct, your relationships don't reflect that goodness, then I doubt that you're spiritual. When I say that honesty is spirituality, that means you're honest to other people. When I say that reliability is spirituality, then I means that other people think you are reliable. And when I say that arrogance is not spirituality, that means that your behaviors, your social behavior, or your behavior in a group is arrogant, and therefore the people around you think that you're arrogant. So we find that spirituality is conduct. It is behavior. Mind can engage in pure intellect. For example, when you're studying physics, it could be a pure mental exercise. Even though physics does have material manifestations, but the acquisition of knowledge of physics could be a very private undertaking. So the evolution of an individual is somewhat different from the evolution of the species. And I think I've been focusing more on the personal evolution, which is the evolution of a specific individual. That how a specific individual evolves physically, intellectually, and spiritually. To sum up, physically, each human individual goes through an evolution of a bell curve. The human body becomes stronger, and then it peaks out in its strength, and then it begins to decline, and this degeneration continues even after death. As far as mental evolution is concerned, we are born with almost no knowledge, and then we gain knowledge. Sometimes we specialize in a particular form of knowledge. Sometimes our knowledge is general knowledge without any specialization. And the mental evolution or the intellectual evolution is the acquisition of knowledge. It is not the use of knowledge. So we continue to evolve mentally and intellectually if we continue to acquire more knowledge. And when we stop acquiring more knowledge and only focus on using the knowledge we have, our evolution peaks out. And then in some cases it might also degenerate, because if you don't acquire knowledge and if you don't use knowledge that you have, then I think you will follow the bell curve even in your mental evolution. And the third is spirituality, which I define as goodness to others, and of course goodness to yourself, goodness to your family members, goodness to people who work with you, goodness to the people who come in touch with you, and goodness to the people whom you don't know, goodness to strangers. All this is spirituality. Spirituality is goodness to others. It's conduct. It's being honest, it's being reliable, it's being humble, it's being patient. All these good qualities, all these conducts constitute spirituality. And I do think that an individual acquires goodness, first in the family, then in the community, and then through his or her own reflection. So a human individual is capable of spiritual evolution, even if the family and the community are spiritually corrupt or spiritually backward. I think an individual does have the capacity to evolve very differently from the spirituality of his or her family and his or her community. And we all hope that most human beings will acquire goodness in their spiritual evolution.